Senior Advisor for Foreign Policy and National Security, former Acting Director of National Intelligence, Rick Grenell. Rick, your reaction today. You spent a decade of your life at the United Nations. You've seen a lot of speeches from world leaders, including American leaders. Was this just a speech that was just like not reality? It's words that sound nice, but not realistic. None of this matches the images we see on TV or the reporting even out of the administration itself.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Jordan. I spent 8 years of my life there. I've helped write a number of presidents' speeches. I've seen hundreds of world leaders' speeches. And this was the typical UN lingo, just regurgitating a bunch of the UN lingo. And I think the way you say it is exactly right. It doesn't match reality. I mean, look, we've got two permanent members of the Security Council, the United States and France, who currently have no ambassadors in each other's country. France has withdrawn their ambassador because of the way that they've been treated by the Biden team. That wasn't even mentioned. I mean, this is the UN Security Council is everything at the UN. Two members are fighting, and Biden didn't even mention it. I mean, this was just a bunch of lingo regurgitated, and I think everybody in that room loved it because they don't face reality either. They don't live in the real world. It's a bunch of diplomats.
You know, we've had experience with the UN also for almost 20 years. Of course, as you know, our European Center for Law and Justice is a NGO with the United Nations. We've intervened on countless cases, mostly involving religious liberty and religious freedom around the globe and people being persecuted for their faith. But I found it ironic that Joe Biden, the president, today starts let's play that bite, actually, where he talks about the 20 years, first president in 20 years not to be at war. Let's take a play.
I stand here today for the first time in 20 years with the United States not at war. We've turned the page. All the unmatched strength, energy, and commitment, will, and resources of our nation are now fully and squarely focused on what's ahead of us, not what was behind.
Interesting words which you would not have written, I would not have written, because it's actually not accurate. So we may not be at a bullets war where we've got ammunition going off and troops being deployed. But let's be realistic. We've got a major crisis with Iran. We've got a major crisis with China. Russia's certainly rattling their sabers. And the approach, it appears to me, Rick, is that this administration basically says, well, we actually don't have troops deployed, thus we're not in battle.
Well, that's not the truth either. I don't want to go into great details about our intelligence capabilities, but the reality is that we do. And he should know that. He was not properly briefed. And whoever signed off on that phrase, I think, has their head in the sand. Look, you and I have talked about this before, Jay. We've got a national security advisor who's an academic. And when you write a white paper and you see the world on a one-dimensional piece of paper, that is fundamentally different than the information you get on the ground in the real world. And that's why now we're finding all of these intelligence, State Department, and DOD officials who are coming forward saying, I've been warning the Biden team for months that there would be a collapse in Afghanistan. And they just ignore this information, and they go to the UN and they speak to a bunch of people who also ignore reality. You know, the diplomats there in New York, I know them very well, they don't represent their people. I mean, 69 of those countries that Joe Biden spoke to criminalize homosexuality. 9 of those countries will kill you for being gay. And there wasn't a lick of decriminalization talk from Joe Biden. We didn't talk about Kosovo, Serbia, and the Balkans issue. Joe Biden didn't mention a word of that. I could go through a litany of issues that Joe Biden didn't even mention, but instead he talked a lot about how much money we're going to give to other countries for infrastructure and climate issues. And this was a speech that was not America first; it was globalization first.
You know, we know that this is happening in a couple of different areas, right? And that we've got issues where the speeches are given. The speechwriters write the speeches. We all understand that. But the problem is, the difficulty, I would say, to the problem is, the reality is not that. You mentioned the human rights abuses. I could add to that in the West Bank and Gaza, pastors and others thrown off the tops of buildings, We're still giving them aid.
Chinese.
The Chinese.
Genocide.
Yep, genocide. So why would you not address the human rights issues?
Yeah, look, I don't understand it. It's global talk. It's what the UN wants. You don't address it because it makes people uncomfortable in that situation. We've talked about this before. Joe Biden maximizes consensus. He wants the world to like him. And when you go into that room, you got to talk in these, big, lofty phrases. You can't point out countries that are a problem. I will say this. I was very uncomfortable to see the section on Israel. Because when he said his couple of lines, he said, well, let's be clear, we want a Jewish state. And then he said in front of that huge 193-member UN Assembly Hall, which is hostile towards Israel, he uttered the words, but, right after he said, we want a Jewish state, but. And then he went on to talk about how, we've got to somehow have, two-state solution where the Palestinian Authority gets this and that. And, there's money coming into the Palestinian Authority. I just am very uncomfortable when a United States president does anything but support Israel unequivocally, especially at the United Nations.
We can play that because you're right. The reference there is pretty troubling. Take a listen.
To manage tensions around the world, must seek a future of greater peace and security for all people of the Middle East. The commitment of the United States to Israel's security is without question, and our support for an independent Jewish state is unequivocal. But I continue to believe that a two-state solution is the best way to ensure Israel's future as a Jewish democratic state, living in peace alongside a viable, sovereign, and democratic Palestinian state.
Again, it's that broad talk, Rick, that you were talking about that they like to hear at the UN. What's surprising to me is he did get applause at the end, even though we know our NATO allies are not happy with us. Do you think, Rick, the world was applauding at the UN because they like this position of America? They like America in this spot where we look weak, we look like we need everybody's help. We're going to throw out all the money, make friends again by giving out money, even though diplomatically we've got mistake after mistake piling up. They'd still rather have that America than a strong one.
Yeah, and I think the only difference is they would say they're not necessarily cheering for a weak America, even though we know they are. They would just say, we want consensus. We want everybody to be equal. And what I've always said when I was at the UN is people are equal. Countries are not equal. And we need to not shy away from that. There's only one country at the United Nations that gets in trouble for pushing its own agenda, and that's the United States. When you have negotiations in the Security Council, there's 14 countries pushing what's best for them. The Germans push in a phrase or a statement from the UN, what is best for Germany? And everybody at the UN knows that that's the case. And the United States should be able to do that too, but we don't. We apologize on the world stage.
Rick, is always great to have you on. Great to have you part of the ACLJ team, especially to have someone who spent the time at the UN as an ambassador before becoming the acting director of national intelligence to give us that insight into what this speech meant at the UN.